We have, I believe, 12 teams to go through in this conference. And let's lead it off. Let's go right into it. We're going to go straight to team by team previews. Of course, the rotation is going to be the same. We're going to go to Jake first, who is going to take us through the 49ers of Charlotte. Jake, tell us about this team in 2024.
Yeah, this is not to be mistaken with the San Francisco 49ers. This team is a little less talented than that football team. Biff Poggi is their coach going on their second year. He's looking to turn around the Niners in year two. I think he's got kind of his work cut out for him. This was a team who kind of showed some flash last year in their 3 wins, but they're going to have a lot of new faces, particularly with some Power 4 transfers. Now, is the talent going to be there? Not necessarily sure, but it's kind of a wait and see kind of thing. Max Brown, the Florida transfer, he's going to be the starting quarterback for them. If you guys remember right, he stepped in for Graham Mertz in the Florida State game, and I believe the Missouri game as well. Might have even caught some run in another game as well. So got a little bit of a SEC experience under his belt. I think he's going to be, I don't know, he won't be a downgrade from the guy they had last year, but I'm not so sure he's going to be an upgrade at this point. We'll have to wait and see. I was talking before the show that there's some Iowa State ties to this conference. Starting running back for them probably will be Cartavius Norton. I think he started last year as the number 1 back for Iowa State. I was kind of bummed to see him go when he did enter the portal. I think this is a good get for them. I think he's going to be an upgrade for them at this point. And they also got CJ Stokes, who's a Michigan running back for them. So 2 Power 4 guys, I think that could be good replacements, good upgrades. But like I said, this is going to be a completely different team. 27 transfers have come in, about 30 have left. They lost one of their best linebackers last year to South Carolina, and the defense was already not very good. They ranked 112th in returning production on that defensive side of the ball. So talent not going to be there on the defensive side. Can they turn this thing around just with, I don't know, scheme or anything like that? We'll have to wait and see. I'm guessing that we might see a little bit of closer matchups, closer games this year, but I'm going to guess they're going to still hover around that 3 or 4 win range.
Yeah, Charlotte, not a great team, but shockingly one of the requested teams we had to preview. I think it was one of our first clips we had posted, and somebody responded back like, do Charlotte, which was a shock.
This is a coach who came in first year and claimed they were going to win the American. I think Poggi did that in the press conference last year's introductory. I love the idea and the confidence behind it. It is interesting that there's a school like this in that big of a market. Like Charlotte is a massive market, but what is the market for a school in North Carolina when there's already Duke, North Carolina, Forest, North Carolina State? You know, like it feels like a program that could be better and better and kind of grow with the money in the area. But you do kind of wonder, like they figured out the baseball thing. They're not really a great basketball program. Jake, like remind me,
they're not.
Like I feel like they just need a little something else. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's nothing unique about Charlotte, I guess is what I'm saying, as a school itself.
Are they stupid question, but I know they're relatively new to FBS football. Are they a relatively new just football program in general, or have they always been?
Reese, you're my Wikipedia guy. Get on.
I don't know. That's something you got to research.
I want to say it was early 2000s, kind of the same timeline as.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, but
yeah,
I don't think they're newer than FIU. Are they?
No
way.
I'm not saying
FIU came in 2004, so I mean, if
you're Charlotte, isn't it kind of interesting a program like this, if they are as new, like they're new to FBS, we're saying that, but ends up in the American, kind of lucks out and ends up in one of the top 2 G5 conferences, if not the top G5 conference.
Yeah, like kind of like USF. I mean, if we're similar situation.
100%.
I don't know
100%.
if we can talk about this as a top. I mean, are you saying the American the top 2 G5 conference?
Absolutely.
I think with Cincinnati and other teams, I could hear that.
It's definitely gone down. It's definitely gone down.
I'm probably going Mountain West and Sun Belt. No, I put this at 3 at best. That's an interesting topic.
It's close. It's close.
Top to bottom. I mean, the bottom gets pretty low. I think.
I mean,
I don't know who's covering
like
them,
the Sun Belt's not the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, that's the bottom of the barrel. I think ULM takes the cake as far as
bottom of the barrel in all of these G5 is just brutal.
I'm seeing 2013 is the first year as an FCS independent.
Okay, so that would be it. But that was the first year they played football. They didn't have like a D2 team or anything. They just like built football.
Yeah, this is a good question. I mean, 2013 is shockingly recent.
It is very recent. That's 11 years. So 10 years would have been last year. They had a program. But that's, I mean, just like Jake, what you're saying is they feel like they are trying to build it, using the portal, doing different things, being a little more creative, because obviously the high school recruiting thing hasn't hit.
Yeah.
Maybe it just takes one transfer class to hit, and they'll be off and running a little bit. Build it backwards more so through the portal.
That's really what they need. But all right, let's move down the line. We have a ton of teams to cover. We're going up to JP for this one. We are going to talk a little UTSA. Let's talk about the Texas San Antonio Roadrunners. JP, take us through them.
Yeah, UTSA is one of the more interesting football programs and teams within this conference. When you look at UTSA, kind of where they are, their first year in college football games, I think it was in 13, jumped up to the FBS, made some noise quick. After a couple years of not being great, they hired Jeff Traylor, who is known for his prowess in the state of Texas, for his recruiting, his connections, his ability to get guys to want to play for him. And then he's committed to staying at UTSA. I know for a fact this guy's had job offers at other locations across the country. He's stayed at UTSA. Guys love to play for him. Here's the difference between UTSA this year and in years past. There's not another guy like Frank Harris. Like for that program, Frank Harris is build a statue outside the Alamo Dome. Let that guy kind of be everything that you've been as a program. You're going to have to replace him now. And that is tough. I think it's a bigger step up than what people realize with a program like this, even if they do recruit at such a high level in the state of Texas. Outside of the running backs, though, like this is a skill position turnover. I was just talking about that right there. Kavarian Barnes is going to be the stud. He'll be the workhorse, a great running back. I think he's comparable, if not better, than Sincere McCormick. If you guys remember Sincere McCormick and those Frank Harris teams, I think they ran Conference USA for quite some time. But the receivers aren't there. The big play guys aren't there that they've had over the years. Also, when looking at the defense, like you're going to have to find new stars, new centerpieces, but they're going to be solid. It's kind of a no-name bunch in the fact that they have some guys that are good. And if you're a fan of the program and closer to the program, you're going to know these guys, but nationally, they're not guys that are going to jump off the page at you. But this has always been a team known for the offense. If you go back and look at those Conference USA years, they were just outscoring people. I mean, they were just lighting up the world. And they did that again last year, putting up a ton of points. I believe the defense gave up 24 a game last year. I could see this team being a little bit better just with some more experience within the roster. I do think Jeff Traylor is an underrated coach. I think he is bound for a bigger job. I just really think he likes where he is, and it might just be a certain job to pull him away. Maybe that's a Texas or a TCU, somebody within the state of Texas that he can keep those connections with him. I do think 31 points a game, like I was saying for the offense, I don't know if that'll happen again, but I don't know if it needs to. If you improve a little bit on defense, you don't have to be shooting a score over 30 a game, but if you can get around that 26, 27 mark, I think you're living a good spot. Players to know that you need to understand with UTSA. Owen McCown will take over the quarterback role. He did get snaps last year, late in the year. Looked pretty good. I think they're happy with where they are in him, but don't expect him to be the game changer that Frank Harris was a year ago. Kavarian Barnes, again, it's got to be the workhorse, an absolute stud in the backfield. Defensively, Daniel Taylor, linebacker, he's going to be your All-American Athletic Conference guy. And then pause if you've heard this name before. How about a guy named Denver Harris? Denver Harris, a former five-star to Texas A&M, was there, left Texas A&M, went to LSU, a part of a team that I really thought used the portal well to pick up DBs. It just didn't really work out for him there. Ends up at UTSA. Now, can he be the star that he was, people thought he was out of high school and that are assuming him to be? So I'm really excited to watch this UTSA team. They'll definitely be in the top 4 of the conference, fight for a conference title spot. If you're looking at this schedule, you're not scared of it. You miss USF and you miss Tulane. So Memphis is going to be your toughest game within the conference. It's a rough start. This team could start off 1-2 and still fight for a conference title. Kennesaw State, we've talked about them. They're going to be a rough at Texas State. That's in San Marcos. Texas State's going to be high flying. We'll preview them next week. And then at Texas. So 1-2 there and can still play for an American Conference title. Very similar to last year. So that's UTSA. I don't know if you guys have anything you want to add on them, but they're definitely interesting to research because there's new names to learn within this program you've not used to seeing.
Yeah, I was going to say,
got rid of old Frank after 7 years. Guy couldn't stay in college any longer.
I don't know if they were getting rid of him. I think they'd keep him around for 8 if they
He
could.
got his doctorate finally.
I think one guy they'd keep around if they could is Trey Moore, the defensive end. I think he went to Texas, right? I think he was the defensive player of the year in the conference last year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, he is at Texas.
Cam Alexander, another safety, went to Oregon. So those are 2 really good players. But like, how many times do we say in the Mountain West preview, like these former 5-stars, like Denver Harris's situation, that are on their 3rd school and it's kind of their last resort for this G5 deal, and it's kind of make or break especially for him, who never got into like any legal trouble, but just kind of seemed like a locker room guy kind of issue from what I always heard.
Yep.
Definitely one of the more fun places to watch an American Conference football game is in the Alamo Dome down there. So I like UTSA for that reason alone. But
the fan base loves it down there. Like, they have a great atmosphere. They show up for games too, which is when they're good and the Americans popping. Like, that's one of the places you want to watch a game.
Right. It can get loud too. I miss the old Alamo Bowl. And I mean, the old Alamo Bowl, like the MasterCard era, that was like the peak of that bowl game, I would say.
The Valero Alamo Bowl, I think is what it's been called recently.
Valero.
Nebraska, Auburn. That was a Cotton Bowl.
That was Cotton Bowl. Nebraska, Michigan actually was the MasterCard Alamo Bowl, like in 05. But good call, Reese. All right, going down to Reese, actually. Reese, it was only fitting to give you the Army Black Knights to talk about. So let's talk about Army in 2024. Take us through them.
I'm glad I got this one. I think when you look at this team, if you're an Army fan, the Black Knights, you're going to be just fine because you still got head coach Jeff Monken. His 11th year there. He's got a 70-55 record since he's been there, and that's a winning record at a military service academy school. That's pretty good for you who keeping track at home. 4-1 in ball games. They've gone 6-6 in the past 2 years. But before that, the last 2 years, they had won 9 games and even won 10 games in 2018 as well. It's also their first year in the American, so that's kind of exciting for them to actually finally get themselves into a conference. And like I said, this team was 6-6 last year, but people forget they went to Air Force, who was 8-0 at the time, and I believe in the top 20, and went in there and handled them. They also beat Navy at the end of the year. So if you're the head coach at Army and you find a way to beat both of those teams, you're having a pretty good year. When it comes to just knowing guys, it's Army, so you're not really going to know who your quarterback is, who your running back is. It's just guys are going to be plug and play for that system. And then when you dive into the schedule, it's a little promising because they missed the top 3 best odds-on teams to win the conference in Memphis, Tulane, and USF. And they catch the next best 3 odds. They catch them all at home. They get Rice, UTSA, and North Texas all at home. And they also catch Air Force's home as well. And then because of the laws here in upstate New York, I can't see like their win total or odds to win the conference because they're in the state of New York or whatever. But the thing I think when you talk about this team this year too, you guys mentioned in the group chat, but the Army Navy game is no longer a standalone game, which I think is a sin in of itself. I'm sure we'll dive into that. I think you guys will have thoughts on this.
That's a crime.
But that not being on its own anymore and going along with the Celebration Bowl and the Camellia Bowl, like, who cares about those? Like, the fact this is not a standalone day anymore doesn't make any sense to me. So
it 100% hurts those bowl games. Like, you're not going to get the eyes. I know it's schedule based that you're making the change, but it definitely hurts getting eyes to that program. Yeah. Jeff Monken, though, like, I'm happy you said that, Reese. Like, the job he's done is commendable. Like, I think a lot of people really respect him within the industry, in the coaching world. Last year, something to note on last year, remember kind of like we're trying to spread it out a little bit more. They're changing up the way they're running the triple option. Did not work. They bail on it, and then they win their last 4. It's like, actually, we don't want to do that. Let's go back to the way we were doing it. So you're going to get Army at Army's best, and I think that's a big thing. Getting used to maybe a conference schedule and how games feel in certain situations will be an adjustment. But I think if you're going to have someone at the helm, Monken's the guy you want to have doing that.
And I mean, like last year too, they got Delaware State, ULM, Holy Cross, UMass. I think it's not a
no
huge
more of that
change, but yeah, you're going to have to put consistent weeks together.
Yeah,
in an
100%
conference.
When you go
it does
East
give them
Carolina Air Force. Yeah, there's a 5-game stretch in here, I think, right before Navy that is going to tell us everything we need to know about Army. Ready? East Carolina Air Force at North Texas, Notre Dame, UTSA, all before Navy. So if they can get out hot, get themselves in a good spot for bowl contention, I think we're going to really know what Army has in front of them. Not saying they're a conference title contender, but you got to be happy with where they are, I think, after year 1.
And it does give them a chance to kind of get deeper into both maybe playoff discussions one day to grab a G5 bid, or at least build rivalries, not just be the program you watch week 14 on the standalone game. Like maybe it'll create some situations where they're competing for a conference title, which helps a program out. But all right, that's all on Army. We are transferring the page over to my Mean Green of North Texas. I fell in love with this team a little bit during the offseason, played with them in college football revamped. I established them as my college football 25 rebuild team. And going into this season, kind of reading into them, I realized maybe my hands are a little full here, because this defense last year, which I did want to tread lightly here in case there's fans out there listening to this. Oh my God, were they abysmal. Gave up 480 yards per game
on that one.
And they were just brutal. 40 points a game they gave up. I mean, these scores are like the 2014 Big 12 era scores. It's a joke. They still won 5 games, but you want to know why you can win 5 games? It's because you also almost put up 500 yards a game on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, their offense was there. It's just their defense let them down so much and so consistently that they would lose those games 52-45. So the offense is there, and I actually like the additions they made on offense. If you haven't heard me give a preview before, I'm going to give you 3 key points to them having a successful year based off of what they had last year, what they added. There's 2 on this, and the first one is defense. You have to revitalize, take steps forward for this defense to have any sort of successful year, because if you get half the production from your offense that you got last year, you're not even going to be competitive. They didn't really get a ton of players in the portal that jumped off the page. Really none. I mean, they returned Ridge Textada, who's a 3-year starter. They returned 5 starters on the defensive side of the ball in general. Is that a good thing? I don't know. You got to expect them to somewhat develop into the scheme. Second-year head coach, Eric Morris, he likes what they did on the offensive side of the ball, so maybe they'll understand the scheme better this year and compete. What's not on their side for that defense is the schedule. Last year, they kind of had a favorable schedule. They get Cal, that's their Power 4 opponent. They get La Tech, they get Abilene Christian, they get Navy before they're in the conference. And then all of a sudden this year, you open up with South Alabama, who, ask any Oklahoma State fan out there, not really somebody you want to run into early in the year. And then they play at Texas Tech in week 3. So the schedule is not really there for them to take a huge step forward, but really you're just fighting for 6 wins with the defense you have right now in a second year of a head coach. My second point for them, I don't know if you guys saw this, but everybody watches week 1 last year, Colorado TCU. That quarterback that played at TCU, Chandler Morris, now plays quarterback for the Mean Green. So let it be the Chandler Morris and Ragsdale show. Who's Ragsdale? Ikea Ragsdale. He was a good running back for them back in 2022, missed the 2023 season the majority of the time with injury. He comes back. Let it be the Morris and Ragsdale show all year long on the offensive side of the ball. Eat up clock, run the read option game. That's how this team will find success within the early parts of their schedule and later part of their conference schedule, because they didn't really get a great draw there either. I expect this team to be in a 4 or 5 win range just because of the toughness of the schedule, which I've mentioned. And I just don't see on paper where they made the massive jumps defensively to make up for all the points they gave up last year. That they returned the 5. They didn't add any big Power 4 guys that fell down, any good G5 guys. So I really don't know on this team in general for the season defensively, but I think the offense will be there. I think they have options. They have a really good offensive lineman, an all conference player that there's probably going to get some draft looks, but the defense is too much of a question mark to say they're going to have a good year. So that's what I have on the Mean Green. Any comments from the crew on the Mean Green? Chandler Morris, former Big 12 quarterback, Jake.
Yeah, I think Morris will be good, but like you kind of said it, the portal was an absolute factory for them. Just guys coming in and out. They have a lot of, you said it, they don't have a lot of big Power 4 names, but they have a lot of big Power 4 players. We'll see if they're just kind of second or third string guys or if they'll actually make an impact. But they lost their starting quarterback last year to Chandler Rogers. He went to Cal. Lost their starting receiver, Jabari Macklin. He's going to be really good at Kentucky. And then they lost Ayo Ajayi to James Madison, because you talked about
what a name.
Yeah, they talked about the kid who started a couple years ago. He's going to be taking back the reins. So
they've had good things to say about Stone Earl too. If you look at their depth chart right now, the way they posted it, they said he might start over Chandler Morris, which is crazy to say. If you're doing that, don't do that. But both guys have dual threat capability.
And they've consistently hired back to the offensive side of things, right? Like the firing of Seth Luttrell 2 years ago, I think kind of people were questioning, like, can you really take a step up from where he was and what they were doing? Remember, it was Austin On was their quarterback. He was like 27 years old. He and that team, they change coaches, right? They bring in Eric Morris, and it's the same identity, but it's just done a little different. And so I get what Parks is saying. Like, where are we going to see the change? Where are we going to see the defense really take it? Something's got to change here. Like, an identity's got to change, or you're just going to be the same North Texas every year. They'll forever have explosive players on offense. The skill guys have always been there. It's never been the problem. Something's got to give on the other side of the football.
Yeah, and they will give, maybe video game fashion wise. That's where you'll see the most jump. Maybe I'll let you see how I run my schemes down there. But I just don't see it on paper for them to turn it around and do a successful year, especially with the non-conference schedule that they have. But that's North Texas. We're moving down the line. We are going back up to Jake. Jake is going to tell us about one of the conference favorites. Most places have them as the favorite, but you've seen them kind of go back and forth. Let's talk on the Memphis Tigers, and who better to talk on than the Iowa State fan who watched Seth Hannigan have a pretty good game in the Liberty Bowl last year. So Jake, take us through the Tigers of Memphis and a favorite to win this conference in 24.
Yeah, everybody's kind of wondering if this is our G5 champion, so to say, if this is our G5 bid for the playoff this year. They got a pretty good shot. I think they're third in the ESPN FPI rankings right now at 7%. Doesn't sound like a lot, but that's pretty good percentage if your chance to make a 12-team playoff. They brought in a ton of guys through the portal. Everybody knows about their NIL money and their situation there with the FedEx partnering and stuff like that. And you see it on the basketball side of things there too. I think this is a program down the road, no matter what is going to happen to the G5, whether they go off on their own or however it may be. I think this is a program that's ready to take that next step if that comes to it. And they did it by really paying up for some big names. Everybody knows about linebacker Elijah Herring from Tennessee. He was their leading tackler last year for a team in the SEC. That's a big deal. I know Tennessee fans aren't really that bummed about losing him, but I think he's going to make a big impact in the American Conference. Mario Anderson, the running back out of South Carolina, he was their leading rusher last year. So you have two statistical guys who led their teams on an SEC school. That's got to mean something. And I think it can make a big impact on this team who thrives on throwing the ball. Everybody knows the name. Seth Hennigan, their quarterback. I think he's going on year 4 now. He's been around the block for a while. He's turned down some other schools. He wants to stay in Memphis. He wants to compete. He was a top 5 guy in yards last year. And yeah, like you said, saw him throw for $1 billion on Iowa State. So he can really sling it around. He's going to have Rock Taylor back. He's going to have Demir Blankumsey back. Those are kind of 2 of his top wideouts. They did lose a couple, but I think those guys are going to be huge. They had over 1,900 yards just between those 2. So you got a ton of production back, along with Anderson coming in from South Carolina. The problem is defensively, I think everybody knows. I think that's kind of a theme with this conference. You're either really bad on one side of the ball. I know I'm going to talk about a couple of teams that are really bad on offense. It just seems like an American team, you can't be solid on both sides of the ball at this point. Defensively, they really struggled last year. They have 7 total transfers in the secondary. They ranked 121st in passing defense last year. Like Rocco Becht had his career day. He threw for like 450 yards in that bowl game. So they definitely have a weakness at that point, and they're going to look to try to make a change there by bringing in some other guys through the transfer portal. Hopefully, maybe that shores up a little bit of the back end. I think this team's good. The schedule, it's interesting. I got to pull it up here on the top of my head because I don't have it right in front of me. But North Alabama, Troy, at Florida State, 3rd game of the year. So the question is, and I think we've had this conversation before, do you put a team in? Does the G5 bid get 2-loss team in? Or are you just going to automatically give it to Liberty, who's got the worst strength of schedule? We can discuss that another day. It's just something to note because they have at Florida State, they have out South Florida, and they end the year at Tulane. So 3 road games that are really, really tough. They can still go on and win the conference. It's just a matter of, if we're going to take this team seriously as that G5 spot, are they going to win these games? So
their entire road schedule, not really the easiest path in the world. They get Tulane, UTSA, USF, who's supposed to be pretty good, little teaser, Navy, Florida State. Like, that's not the world's easiest road schedule, I would say. So the schedule is definitely a factor. JP, anything on the Memphis Tigers getting G5 bid? You got them up there?
I have them definitely fighting for it. I like that Jake brought up the schedule because I'll touch on that later in the episode. But to me, like, how quick are we getting the ball out of Hennigan's hands? Because the offensive line was a little suspect in some spots last year. They only bring back 2 guys. Maybe it's just, time and money fix the offensive line, like quite literally time and money. But at the same time, like it doesn't need a big jump. It just needs to be average or above average. You just can't have a guy taking extra hits who distributes the ball as well as Hennigan does. Also want to give out shout out to my boy Brock Busick. He works on the athletic department down there, and he was giving me some shit. Yeah, give me some shit about not giving Memphis enough love. So I think we've done a good job of giving them the love they deserve because this is a legitimate playoff contender and a legitimate American Athletic Conference champion. So,
well, Brock, if you weren't watching about 6 weeks ago, middle of the summer heat college football talk, we did a 12-team playoff format. I had Memphis in there as my 12th team. I'm really high on this team.
He was not happy with the SMU shirt I had on the other day. So he was like, I got to send you some gear. I go, gladly.
If you see us in gear, do not take it personally because I think all 4 of us own a majority of just random college gear, even if it's for schools that we don't.
I love wearing that stuff.
Yeah, it's an absolute sickness that I think we all suffer from. So, all right, that's Memphis in 2024. We are moving down the line. Let's go to another fan favorite team, probably one of the better brands in college football, more recognizable. Let's talk Tulane. Let's talk about the Green Wave. JP's taking us through them. JP, tell us about them.
What you need to know about the Tulane Green Wave is that they're going to be the most popular rebuild project within college football 25, just uniform based. This is also a program who's invested in themselves over the last couple of years, renovating the stadium, putting in new turf, rebranding itself, really putting itself in a spot to have an identity and it's recognizable at the switch of a finger. So looking at them under Willie Fritz, this team was 23-4 out of the last 2 seasons. Hey, great news. You made one of the better hires of the offseason, bringing in Summerall from Troy. And he had the same record in his 2 years at Troy. And you could say Troy was in a worse spot than Tulane at the time, but it wasn't too far off. So what an absolute great hire to bring in John Summerall over the summer. He seems very confident with what he has on campus in New Orleans, and he should because this team is super talented, right? The roster turnover, I mean, you lose a guy at quarterback in Pratt who, man, I mean, moved mountains for that school in a lot of ways, really had them in just about every game they played in. How about instead of him, you bring in a guy like Ty Thompson, who has had, taken his time on the bench in some places and hasn't really flourished the way some people would have liked him to, but you bring in a guy of that caliber and that pedigree into Tulane, and he's going to fight for the job. The Kai Horton kid's no slouch. He's a legitimate, quarterback battle. Doesn't sound like Summerall really wants to say when that quarterback battle is ready, but he did say he didn't want to wait till like deep into fall camp. He wants to have that established. So it's really nice to see that he is open, even with the portal, to go get a guy like Thompson. He had a guy last year in Horton that they're really confident in. And so that's great to see because they have a guy in Mekhi Hughes in the backfield who is an absolute workhorse and takes a lot of burden off of quarterback shoulders when they're getting their feet under them. Over, all this, like a top end rush defense is just going to happen again. It's going to be very good defense. They don't blow you away with downfield passing. They're not going to have a ton of chunk plays, but they do have the guys and the discipline and a lot of spots to really make life hell on you on the defensive side of things. If you're looking at Tulane and kind of how everything stacks up, I think most people look at this schedule. They look at the turnover with losing Pratt. You lose your head coach. I don't see that big of a fall off. Like I have a win total here of 7.5, and I think that's a little disrespectful for what this team is. I don't think there's that much of a fall off. They bring back like 7 or 8 starters on defense. They bring back like 6 or so on the offensive side. Those that they don't bring or don't keep, they bring in almost better guys in spots. Like remember Mario Williams? That guy is now at Tulane. Like they brought in former 4-star, 5-star guys into this program who have been proven, who have done things on very high levels. And so I'm really excited to watch this team play football. They're battle tested though. So like if this team wants a G5 bid to the playoff, you're going to have to win some games early. Kansas State and Oklahoma in weeks 2 and 3 is not necessarily like begging someone to give you the G5 spot. If you lose both those and then sweep the conference slate, sure, whatever, you win the American. But if you drop an American game after that and you're a 9-3 conference champion in the American, whether I think you're better than a Liberty or better than a Sun Belt champion or whatnot, it's not going to matter to me. It's going to be what the playoff committee thinks, and that usually doesn't turn out too well. So Tulane, I do think in a lot of ways isn't going to they'll take maybe a small step back, but don't expect them to be outside the top 3 in this conference anymore. So I'm absolutely pumped to watch this team. They're going to have a different identity. They're not going to look the exact same, but they have a lot of the same pieces there a season ago. They held onto the roster a lot better than people expected them to, for sure.
It's very hard to tell with these G5 schools if they're going to continue to get these bigger schools on a schedule to make their case. It's good that they have them now, but going down the line, we just saw it the other day. I forget who it was, but somebody changed the game in 2025, flipped it to an FCS opponent. Like these competitive preseason G5 teams, they're not going to get those calls from Tennessee. They're not going to get the calls from South Carolina to play early in the year. So it's important to see how that goes now. Any other comments from the group on Tulane? Reese, Jake, you got anything on the Green Wave?
I was just going to say, it feels like Thompson, and it's a very basic statement because he's the quarterback. It's the most important position, but I feel like Thompson's the difference between 7-5 and 10-2 because they have skill positions everywhere. Hughes is an absolute stud. So I guess if he taps into his former 5-star potential, this could be a 10-2 team. And I think the Jenkins dude at defensive tackle could be like one of the better players in the conference on the defensive side of the ball. So like you said, JP, I don't see the drop off there. I think this team is loaded. It just they have quarterback.
They have star power on the defensive side. I did mention Tyler Grubbs. Thanks for bringing up the defense and some names on that. It's like there's legitimate star power on the defense. What do you think the leash is for Ty Thompson? Like, let's just say he wins the job. They're 4 weeks in. Let's say they're 2-2 with a loss.
I was going to say we're going to find out very early because you have Kansas State week 2 coming into town. So
I'm just curious how Summerall will handle the quarterback situation. If the battle does go all the way into like early to mid fall camp, you got to think he's confident with both the guys.
I think he's going to get a bigger leash because he was a former 5-star guy, and this is going to really be his first starting experience. I mean, I don't remember him ever getting in an Oregon game, did he? Did Nix ever go out? And he
maybe like up by $1 billion, down by $1 billion.
So he needs like real reps, and I think Summerall notices that, and I think he'll realize that. So I'm going to say he's got a bigger leash, and it just so happens he's getting some leeway with Oklahoma and Kansas State, 2-3, week 2 and 3.
Yeah, I have a G5 fan question that I'm thinking of the casual college football fan. Do you guys think that looking back 2 years ago, they beat USC in a New Year's Six bowl game? That was a competitive game. They win it. Do you think that if they end up in that 9-3, 10-2 spot, and by God's grace are in the conversation, that the casual college football fan is going to be more likely to stick up for Tulane, who they've seen win in that situation, or an 11-1 or 10-2 Liberty, who they just saw in that situation get dismantled?
I think undefeated.
Go ahead,
they're
sticking.
I think they're going undefeated. I mean, we saw with Florida State last year. Not saying we're not going to get into that argument. Not saying Florida State didn't deserve to be in.
That's what he said. He said that Florida State.
Multiple times.
Nobody cares. Like the casual does not care if they have 3 good losses. They want to know who's undefeated. Or
fair enough.
Close to that.
To add to that, though, like Tulane beat a team in USC who didn't had most of their studs playing. Liberty went and played a team of a USC caliber just a year later. Better defense, nonetheless.
Better, yeah.
Full Oregon team to the gills and just got ran out of the building. I mean, Liberty, I love you. I'm not hating on you as a program. I just need you to understand how different it is playing in other conferences and not playing anybody. And you would be like Walmart as an empire in the Conference USA, and then everybody you're playing is like a little family-owned chain restaurant that has 2 locations.
If you watched Liberty last year, I bet on plenty of Liberty games, so I have my eyes on them. Like how many they had slow starts against like Middle Tennessee State and Southern Miss, like you name it. Like they're just playing terrible out the gate, but they were just good enough to
quickly becoming a Liberty rag show. And
I'm all right. I can take that torch for this. I'll take it this year for you guys if we want to get into Twitter fights with Liberty fans, I suppose.
Go pray.
He might end up there. But all right, let's keep moving down the line. We are going to Reese to talk a little bit about the Temple Owls. Reese, tell us about Temple in 2024.
Well, unfortunately, Matt Rule is the head coach in Nebraska, so tough sledding this year for these guys, I think, as well. If you're looking at their over-under for wins for the year, it's at 2.5. You can get the under for -115. So Vegas doesn't have a lot of hope in these guys. 1-7 in conference last year, and they were 0-5 on the road. 3-9 overall. And the problem is they scored 21 points a game, but the problem is you gave up 35 points a game, so you're losing by 2 touchdowns on average. It's head coach Stan Drayton's third year at the helm. He's got a 6-18 record, and I'm not sure how much better it's going to be for him. They open the year at Norman. Then they also catch Tulane, UTSA, ECU on the road, and they get North Texas and FAU at home. They are the worst odds-on team in the to win the conference this year at plus 13,000. They lose their starting quarterback to Rice. They did bring in Evan Simon from Rutgers, and they also brought in a transfer running back from Maryland by the name of Antwain Littleton. So there's some new faces to the offense, so you can hope that there's going to be a little more production there as well. But obviously the defense is awful as well, and most particularly against the run and getting third down stops. So if you're looking for this team to make any kind of advantage or progress, I think Brandon Parks talked about it last week, is just be realistic. If you can find a way to get 3 or 4 wins, you don't got to worry about getting bowl eligible. But can we just take steps in the right direction? Because they also picked up defensive transfers from East Carolina, Rutgers, UTEP, and Western Carolina. So they address the problems they have. It's just going to be, can they actually start them right now and get this team to be better and try to get to 3 or 4 or 5 wins, even though Vegas doesn't seem to be too faithful on them. We'll see what Stan can dial up this year for this program, but might be a rough year again for the Temple Owls. Like I said, 2.5 wins to start off the year. Doesn't really sound like the most promising. So we'll see what this team's going to be, but I don't think there's anything kind of remarkable to talk about with this team right now.
Are we going to give it to Jake for the little laugh chirp towards the Matt Rule comment? That was a nice compliment to Matt Rule, Jake. I think you were laughing just thinking
it was. He did a great job, but he's had 2 other coaching jobs since Temple.
That's I know, Shay, but when you look up their stuff, they're only like 2 winning years in the last 30 years or whatever was Matt Rule.
Yeah, I believe they hosted game day during that time. Like they were, God, what was that quarterback's name? It was like EJ something. Not EJ.
Manuel.
Obviously not EJ Manuel, but yeah, they had some studs playing there.
That was a fun era of college football, which actually we'll get to talk about a little bit near that time frame when we bring up a USF team trying to reignite a spark. But all right, I'm going to move down the line to Tulsa. Let's talk a little bit about the Golden Hurricane. I talk about North Texas first, bad defense. Then I look up Tulsa and I'm starting to do my research on them. I realize, damn, is there any good defenses in the American Conference? Because this is equally as bad. They were just one step ahead of the Mean Green when it came to defense last year, giving up 444 yards per game, and they gave up 30 plus 6 times. They gave up 30 or more points 6 times. I just don't understand the lack of emphasis on defense in this league, but it's got to make it for a fun watch. So if you're out there on Thursday nights, Friday night, and the American Conference is on, flip it on, because there's probably going to be some points being scored on both Tulsa and North Texas. Starting off with my keys to a successful year, let's talk about the transfers on the defensive side of the ball to try and help them. They got a few that should make an impact. Let's lead it off with former Kansas linebacker who transferred to Arkansas State and now is with Tulsa, Gavin Porter. You bring in 5 years of experience at a linebacker position, which was pretty bad for you last year. And then let's talk about Miles Jackson, the edge rusher from UCLA. This guy could make an impact that they really need, because they didn't really have a great ground defense last year. They were terrible on pretty much every facet of the game defensively, and the offense didn't really have it to make up for it, kind of like North Texas did where they were in games. It's a program where I was kind of more used to them being more competitive. Am I wrong in saying that, you guys? Like, I feel like this was a program back in our early college days where we'd watch them and they'd win a bet for us on a Tuesday night, but I didn't know that it was this bad for them last year. They only win 4 games and they're on year 2 of a head coach. So that's really what I have on the main focus for Tulsa this year, is to be a better defensive team. Your second point, you got to have some quarterback development. They don't have big names at the quarterback position, but they did bring in a big coaching name. Let's talk about a former Ohio State passing game coordinator, Corey Dennis, who's now the passing game coordinator here. He is said to be responsible for a lot of the development of Joe Burrow, Justin Fields, Dwayne Haskins. He's pretty good. I mean, that if you get a name like that, you have to see strides within this room, which is very important for this team because it hasn't been a really great quarterback program the last few years, to say the least. My third point, you have to turn the ball over less, because one thing that I failed to mention is that defense, however, they gave up 30 points a game, 500 yards, they still forced 21 turnovers, and they were still not in games. So it's just unfortunate to see that. You also have to turn the ball over less on offense. They had 4 games where they gave up 3 or more turnovers. You knock those down, put your defense on the field a little less. All of a sudden, we're competing in games kind of in that 5 to 6 win realm, which they need to be. That's the step forward that Tulsa's looking to make this year. And that's what I have on the Golden Hurricane. I don't know schedule-wise if I see 6 wins. They do definitely get an easier draw than what they had last year. Last year, they went to Washington, and they hosted Oklahoma. And in those 2 games, they lost 43-10 to Washington and 66-17 to OU. They get Oklahoma State this year, but other than that there's no big Power 4 names back-to-back like that. So,
shout out SMU, put up 69 on them last year. Nice. Yeah. 69-10
wasn't there.
Nice.
Man, I'll tell you that. That is 2 very, very bad defenses to start off.
This, from what I understand from just reading about this program and kind of where they are on things, Kevin Wilson's not a big fan of the NIL stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly what he said. I didn't watch the entire video or read the entire article on some stuff, but it feels like you've got to just maybe not speak out against it. You can be like not okay with it, don't love it or anything, but you can't just come out and speak out against it, because players obviously know that's how the world works now. And if you're not giving your guys the same opportunities as others have, it is a little bit of a deterrent and a deal breaker for some kids.
His comments were kind of, off-putting, but at the same time, I think they actually had like a really good recruiting class for their freshmen last year. It was like in the top 60, which American-wise is really good. So maybe he's just BSing and he's not actually telling these kids that, but he's like, yeah, I got this text message from this kid. What are you going to offer me? And he texts me back, we don't offer anything here. Well, that can't be true.
We don't have that pool here. He said, leave. He said, take the girl, leave the dog. He said, I have a girlfriend and a dog to support. He said, take the girl with you, leave the dog. Absolutely gold press conference.
He's bringing in the Jackson kid from UCLA, the Potter kid from Kansas. So they got to be like kind of offering something to somebody.
Right. And it's a school. Am I wrong in saying that? I know, JP, you were going to chime in, but like I feel like we were watching this team a couple of times on Tuesday nights, like betting on them, right? Didn't you have a 0 betting win on one pick?
Yeah, in 2020 and 19, Xavier Collins, correct?
Yeah.
I think he's a first-round pick out of Tulane. He's a linebacker. They had some studs and they had really good years, and it just coaching changes and things went downhill, and they haven't recovered from it.
Here's a big throwback. They were pretty solid. Iowa State played them twice in one year in 2013, but their quarterback was a Nebraska transfer. Parks was like Green. Was Green his last name?
Cody Green? No, that couldn't have been right.
I think so. I think that's who it was. He was a quarterback for them that year. 20, I want to say 20, maybe it was 2011. No.
Yeah, that's probably right then.
So 2012, 2013, somewhere in that range. So,
that was when Cody Green blew up like Fat Booth. I remember that. I just didn't know he went and played at Tulsa. I remember him getting huge though. But all right, good call out there.
At Tulsa was 2012.
Yeah, Yemeni. Cody Green. That just brought I just lost my place in my thoughts. My mind went blank there. Nice job, Jake. But all right, moving down the line, let's go to another team. Let's talk about the South Florida Bulls. Like I said, trying to reignite a spark that you saw in 2007, 2008. I would love for this team to float around the top of a conference and make some noise just for the child in me. But Jake, tell us about the Bulls in 2024 and what can we expect on the field?
Yeah, I think if they do kind of have that 2008 year that you're talking about, I think Alex Golish is going to be the hottest name on the coaching carousel going into next year. Former like Iowa State ties. He was former tight ends coach at Iowa State, offensive coordinator at Tennessee. He's one of the bright young minds in college football right now. And I think he's got a chance to, I don't want to say, well, didn't they win? They only won like 7 or 8 games in 2008. They just got off to that insane 6-0 start. So maybe they might reminisce a little bit back in 2008, because I think they could probably get to 7 or 8 wins. It starts with the quarterback, Byron Brown. He broke the school record last year for passing as a freshman, like the single season passing record. He broke as a freshman. He had over 3,000 passing yards last year, 800 rushing yards. I think somebody said, or I read that him and Jaden Daniels were the only 2 in college football last year to do that. So they're going to have an absolute stud at quarterback again this year. 17 returning starters as a team in general. Guys, I know it was a sloppy game, but this was a team that gave Alabama fits one of the first weeks of the year. So I don't think we looked back at that game and we're like, oh my God, like this Alabama team is screwed. I think we might just have to tip our cap a little bit to USF. And I think that's a legitimate team this year. Sean Atkins returns as one of the guys in this conference who had over 1,000 receiving yards last year. He's going to help out Brown. And basically, the question is on defense. I talked about these American teams. They're good on one side of the ball. They're pretty bad on the other. The defense was shaky last year, and they also forced 24 turnovers. Can you really rely on forcing that many turnovers again this year? I don't think so. I don't think you should. I think you got to shore up some things and really be solid and not rely on a bunch of turnovers. At Alabama, they're going to Tuscaloosa this year. I believe I got to pull this up again. I think that's week 2.
Correct.
And they're hosting Miami in the non-con. I think the Miami game's going to be personal. You guys saw Syracuse had half a team last year, granted, but they whooped on Syracuse in that bowl game. So I think there's going to be a little bit of a little brother kind of chip on their shoulder type of feeling for that Miami game, especially. They get Alabama early. Can you just stay healthy in that game? Can you give them some looks? Maybe you give Miami a run for their money when they come to Tampa.
That would be absolutely fantastic. And going back, they play Alabama. It's almost a little bit of a revenge game for Alabama because that's really so many.
Yeah, that's not one I would have circle if I'm USF.
Yeah, no,
I'm not circling that one.
Granted, Saban's gone, so DeBoer really doesn't. I mean, he probably remembers people talking about that game, but it's probably like he wants to go in that game and win 56-0. At least the fan base probably expects it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what they expected to do last year.
Should.
Yeah. I mean,
even if it is rain, if it even is a sopping rain.
That's true. That was a messy game, but all right. That's USF. Any closing thoughts, Jake? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was just going to add to that game, though. I'm really interested to see how Brown and Atkins do against the Alabama secondary that's completely revamped.
Yep.
I don't think they'll be able to block, but we'll see.
I'll actually probably bring one of those guys up later. Hint, hint, wink, wink, when it comes to players to watch, which we will also cover if I didn't mention. But all right, that's all on USF. They're expected to be towards the top of the conference. I believe Athlon has them picked 3rd, if I'm not mistaken. So watch out for the Bulls in 24. All right, moving down the line, we are going back up to JP. JP is going to talk to us a little bit about the midshipmen of Navy. JP, take us through them.
Army and Navy being in the same conference, I think, is an underrated aspect of this conference. It gives it a different feel, makes it a little more unique in some spots. Obviously, that game is world renowned and one of the most fun things to watch the entire year. When I'm talking Navy right here, usually you're talking about a team where Kenny Amatololo is at the helm. They win 7 to 10 games a year. That's not Navy anymore. It's a completely new identity and kind of how they do things. Not a fact, again, they're not moving away from the triple option and how they handle things. But it's a new coach, and they're going to now fight one of their biggest rival in the same conference and try to get to the back or to the top of the conference. They used to sit in that 5-4-3 range in this conference and fight for a chance to get in the title. It's not really where they are at this moment in time. I haven't had a winning season since 2017. The rush attack is good. You bring pieces back in fullback Alex Teska. You bring back other pieces that are, that really help an option attack move. Here's your problem. You need a quarterback to run that system. That's exactly how most of these option teams and service academies get to a point really good. Look back at when Keenan Reynolds was running this attack. Look back at what Air Force has had over the last couple of years. And it's going to come down to Blake Horvath. He's going to get the snaps. He just needs to be the guy here. In a triple option attack, like, you can be a facilitator and everything, but you yourself have to be a little bit of a playmaker. So that will be something to pay attention to here for them. The defense is always solid, but it can't be hung out to dry. Like, the offense has got to give them something. They've got to be able to control the clock a little bit more. They've got to sustain drives and not keep this team out on the field forever. They're not a great team when it comes to stopping the run. At least they weren't last year. And that's probably just being on the field for all that time. They bring in a new offensive coordinator in Drew Cronick. From my understanding, is he has a little different spin on the triple option, how he run it. He was the head coach at Mercer for a little bit. It's not going to be the exact same. It's going to be a little more motion, a little more misdirection, a little more flashy in some spots. And if that starts clicking at a service academy, I mean, it's already tough to stop triple option on a week of, 2 padded days, a walkthrough day, and a travel day. And you got to try and fight one of the best running attacks in the country. And then it gets a little more difficult with the way he runs things. If that gets clicking, I think good luck to a lot of schools. It'll keep them in just about any game you could possibly imagine. They're going to have to win games against the middle of the American Conference because that's kind of where they are. Like, you have to win these coin flip games to get to a bowl, and they rely on not beating themselves a lot, which is great. Like, if you don't beat yourself in these smaller conferences, you'll win yourself a lot of football games. It'll be interesting to watch. But if this is a flashy version of triple option in that wing bone and wing T, it's going to be so much fun to watch them. And that Army Navy game is going to be worth so much at the end of the year. One name I didn't mention here, their punter, Riley Reithman, All-American Athletic Conference. He's on a lot of awards lists. Like, if you're going to run this kind of offense and have that kind of defense and try to control a game the way you are, you got to have a good punter. And if this guy starts throwing darts on the 5 and 2 yard line, like, good luck to move the ball 98
this is
yards.
like your ultimate. This is your ultimate.
I mean, but
you love this team.
I get it. Like, I don't, as an Iowa fan, I'm so used to it, so I understand it. Like, you're going to have to be able to handle that thing if you're going to control a game like Navy does in this situation. So again, Colin Ramos, Blake Horvath, Alice Teska, these are all guys that have got to, they'll be your stars. Horvath hopefully was just going to take this midshipman team to another level.
All right, that's Navy in 2024. One of the better viewing pleasures of life is the triple option and an option offense in general. So we always appreciate when we get to watch those on the field.
Go Army, be Navy.
Yeah, I mean, we got a little Army rivalry down below. No matter the preview, he's got the hatred flowing. Going down the list, let's go to UAB, a program that literally did not stand 10 years ago, about 10 years ago. If you don't know what I'm talking about, please look up the video.
All-time
Probably one of the funnier things on the planet, or on planet Earth. It's probably one of the funnier videos out on YouTube. It's still out there, by the way. But let's talk a little bit on UAB in 2024. Reese has taken us through that. So if you want to take me off, that's pretty cool too. I mean, but Reese is taking us through UAB.
Talk a little bit
Putting the
of Blazers
pressure on me.
Alabama, Birmingham, 9th in conference last year. They went 4-8. They went 3-5 in conference. Another team that didn't win a conference game or a game in general on the road. Over under wins this year's at 6.5. And this year they open up on the road at Arkansas. And then in conference, they also catch the top 2 teams in USF and Memphis on the road. And then they also catch Army on the road, and they get Tulane at home along with Rice and UConn. And I think head coach Trent Dilfer, he went and kind of saw the struggles this team had, especially defensively, and he went to work in the portal. They got 19 guys, most of them being on the defensive side of the ball, mostly 3 stars and 1 4-star. They did pick up a running back as well from LSU by a guy named Armani Goodwin to help out. Last year's top running back comes back, Jermaine Brown Jr. He rushed for over 800 yards and 12 touchdowns. I mean, offensively, they were a pretty solid team. If you take away the 32 sacks, 13 interceptions, and 7 lost fumbles, but they scored 30 points a game. But the problem was they gave up 37 points a game. So like I said, that math doesn't work there if you're trying to win football games. They averaged 166 rush yards and threw for over 280 yards a game. So, and the big thing too is they do have their quarterback coming back, Jacob Zeno, the former Baylor commit. He threw for over 3,100 yards last year, 20 touchdowns. But the only problem is he's got to replace his top receiver from last year, who was a 6th-rounder to the Cardinals, who accounted for over 850 yards and 7 touchdowns. They did bring in a dude from Chattanooga who had over 62 catches and 1,000 yards last year. So I think they kind of have a guy they're trying to figure out to plug in and play there. And I mean, you would think Trent Dilfer could dial some up for these guys to get them some more reps as well. So,
all right, there it is on UAB. Any other comments on UAB? It's obviously a weirder program, cooler brand though. JP, would you say that I'm okay saying that? Pretty cool brand. They do.
I think it's popular. I've never been head over heels for it. It's cool.
Really,
it's cool. I don't think I don't know. Something about the Dragon just doesn't work for me.
DJ Law.
Yeah, DJ Law. Shout out DJ Law. Last chance.
We're doing UAB.
He did get an offer there. He said, no, he didn't. He got an offer there. Is that the one that he threw away and said, I ain't going to your school? I believe, right?
I could be.
It's probably a lot of them.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
That's the one he ended up going to, though.
Yeah. Oh, God, that show is absolute television gold, except for the last season. I almost dropped the F-bomb, but Netflix, come on, get your shit together. And I don't want to watch basketball Last Chance U either. That sucked. All right, that's UAB in 2024. Now moving down the line to me, I'm going to talk a little FAU. I'm glad you guys brought it up earlier, but I'm so confused as to why South Florida and FAU aren't these super competitive recruiting schools to where they're getting guys. I mean, who did we mention earlier? Charlotte. Like, they should be in the scene with Duke and North Carolina, getting these athletes to the school in a hot spot. South Florida should be in there. FAU should definitely be in there. It's a very appealing school, but looking at them on paper in 2024, you're bouncing back from a 4-8 year. Second year under Tom Herman. Yes, that Tom Herman. You had Casey Thompson last year. You made a little bit of noise early in the year. He goes down with an injury. He transfers out. Who do you bring in to replace him at quarterback? Which is my first point for FAU in 2024, is you have to decide who your quarterback's going to be. Who's going to lead you through this season, because they got it down to two guys. You bring in a Marshall transfer and Cam Fancher. Threw for 2,100 yards last year, just over it. Had a pretty good year, but I've heard some rumblings through various FAU podcasts, pages, forums, previews, that Tyreek Stark is definitely within the mix to start for this team. So I think FAU, once you figure out who your quarterback is, what's your next step to a successful year? Have consistency as an offensive unit. You only return two guys on the offensive side of the ball, but is that the worst thing in the world when you only put up 21 or more? And I'm sorry, you put up 21 or less in 67% of your games last year. So you definitely need to have more offensive production, be consistent, especially when we just had the conversation, the last two previews I've done, and probably 5 of the 12 that we've done already, that you have to put up points to win in this conference. The defenses aren't there for you to not put up points. And you should be getting good athletes to FAU. However, they did have kind of a few guys max exodus into the transfer portal. They brought in, like I said, Cam Fancher, but really nobody else that jumped off the page to me. And then my last point, starting off well is a must. You get 4 of your first 6 games at home. You got to make the most of it. You need more offensive star power. It's another program. I've said it for all 3 of my teams that I've covered today that all went 4-8 last year. You just got to take a step forward, especially under Tom Herman. He'll get the job done. He's had offenses that have been successful in his past coaching jobs, so he'll get it there. Is Cam Fancher the answer? I don't know. I hope so, but I don't see a ton on paper from FAU this year. When I said they're scheduled to get 4 of the 6 at home, the lead off at Michigan State, that could be competitive, I guess, with how bad Michigan State was last year. But then they kind of go on this little realm where they should win games. Army, FIU, Connecticut, Wagner, and then they go into their conference schedule. So they should have some success early in the year, but they have a daunting last few weeks at East Carolina, at Temple, at Tulsa. They play South Florida. They go at UTSA. So it's just not there in line for Herman to take this massive step forward this year. But they have the athletes. We'll just see how they can use them. But that's what I have on FAU in 2024. I believe we have a couple teams left, but any FAU comments, Tom Herman comments? Jake, you a Tom Herman fan? Former Texas coach.
Former Iowa State offensive coordinator.
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. I should have mentioned that. Part of the mid-3 at one point.
The ties keep coming around. No, I don't. I think this is one of the teams we kind of know about. Their schedule's pretty easy, but I think this is a bad team.
Oh, yeah.
They don't have anybody coming back
for no reason.
I think if you give him time, he'll figure it out. I think he'll figure out a way to take kind of the leftovers in the state of Florida that are still good players and keep them there.
God, every preview season, it still shocks me how many teams are down there, man, spread out over the state of Florida. There's so many Division I football teams. It's kind of shocking. But all right,
that's $1 billion.
That's so true. FAU in 2024. There it is. All right, moving down the line, going back to Jake to cover probably one of the better fan bases within this conference in ECU. Let's talk a little bit of Pirate football in 2024. Tell us about them.
Yeah, this is a little similar to Charlotte in the fact that they were ranked among some of the worst in in college football in total offense. I think this team has potential just because of what they get on the defensive side of the ball. The recruiting class or transfer portal class ranks 3rd according to 24/7 in the American. They're bringing in 19 guys. 16 of those guys come from the Power 4 levels. We'll see. It's just a number at this point, especially when we're talking in June. But I like that over probably grabbing some FCS D2 guys. So they're going to give them a chance there. Defensively, like I said, they were really good last year. Defensive tackle Deontay Johnson and Chad Stevens and cornerback Siobhan Ravel. These are guys who are all voted first team, all defense, all conference, all defense, according to Athlon. So I think they're returning a lot of production on defense. Just what's going to happen on offense this year. Quarterback wise, they bring in Jake Garcia. If that name rings a bell, he was the guy who lost the quarterback battle at Missouri last year to Brady Cook. Now he goes over from Eastern Carolina. I think he was even at Miami before Missouri. So his third time around, I'm a little skeptical offensively to see if they'll make a jump, but the defense is really good. I think it's going to give them a chance. Let's hope some of those transfers pan out. And I think this team could get to 5 wins, I'd say, which I think would be a good year for them. So
I miss the days of a little bit of competitive ECU football where they'd have those late year games that would be very important. That place rocks.
I think
Uniform rocks.
it's a fan base that really cares. It really
They really
is.
do.
It's a good G5 stadium.
I love that comment out of Reese. It is a great brand. JP, any comments on the Pirates in 24?
I kind of see what Jake's saying here. Like, this is a program that used to win all the time and be a top of the country in the G5 area.
Yep.
Maybe just maybe they're just a year off, like 1 or 2 off, and then they'll be back to that prowess. But I think they got to catch up with some really good programs who have kind of gotten their feet settled and really set the bar high in this conference. So it's going to be a tougher climb than it used to be within the conference.
But all right, that's East Carolina in 2024. Let's move down the list to our last team. JP's taking us through them. JP, talk a little bit about the Rice Owls this season and what we're going to see on the field.
Yeah, head coach Mike Bloomgren's been there. This will be his 7th year now. This is the first time since 2014 they've been to back-to-back bowl games. Too bad you ran into a buzzsaw in Texas State last year in a little in-state rivalry and just got your doors blown off. But JT Daniels is there last year. They now bring in a guy who I think has a higher upside than JT Daniels. Not JT Daniels out of high school, but a JT Daniels that transferred 4 times and ended up at Rice. EJ Warner, the kid from Temple, who set a ton of freshman records at Temple a season ago, led the AAC in passing yards, comes into a pass happy offense where there are weapons in place. Now, there's no McCaffrey running around who's beyond reliable for this team a season ago, but there are weapons and running back Dean Connors. And if you can find a way to get this kid comfortable quick, get him in space, make the offensive line just be I think they'll be an above average unit. If they can find ways to get the ball in and out of his hands and maybe push the ball downfield every once in a while and use the pass to open up the run game, I think this is going to be a very good offense in some ways in the American Athletic. Now, the one thing that kind of slows me down on this is the receivers are good, but how many receivers are you going to have that really are playmaking ability? There are some spots early in the schedule to find that footing with a Sam Houston, a Texas Southern, at Houston, playing a game against Houston, an in-town rival. Like, maybe you go play this Big 12 team and you give them a run for your money and you draw all the confidence in the world. Yeah. Like, it's a possible thing. I just think you need to get Warner comfortable in the system with some of his other guys before you go into that big jump, right? Defensively, hopefully just experience brings a better defense. Just so another year in the system, another another year with these guys around you, that hopefully is a jump. Some of these smaller schools, it could hurt you to bring some guys back. Other ones, it's a real asset to have. For me, I think the biggest part of all this is the Charlie Lowe's kid that came in from Dartmouth. I believe he was Ivy League Player of the Year. He was up for Ivy League Player of the Year a season ago on the defensive line. A real disruptor on the interior. If the defense is going to improve, it's going to be because this guy is really causing a lot of havoc. This team, for me, I think is going to be better than most people think. 6.5, 7 or 8 wins is not out of the question for a Rice Owls team. This is a program who was kind of forgotten about for a long time, I would say, and it's taken a slow and steady rise back to the top, and it seems like they're doing it more. And Mike Bloomgren, credit to him for making this kind of a destination for some kids. Like, you're getting high-end pieces. Maybe that's from a G5 level where they were really talented, or maybe that's just a guy like a JT Daniels coming into play after he hasn't found a home anywhere. But I'm pumped to watch this team. I think the schedule isn't perfect. I mean, you get South Florida, UAB, Memphis, Tulane, UTSA, you get them all. So, like, you're going to have to win tough games. So maybe if you go 6-6 again, you can't look at it as a down year, or maybe not the step forward you were looking for Rice, but I just schedule based. Like, that's just how things work out sometimes.
All right, there's Rice in 2024. That actually wraps up every team within this conference. We did every team's individual team by team preview. That's all we have team by team. Now we're going to go into the grand scheme of things. Let's talk players to watch within the American Athletic Conference. Let's lead it off with Jake first. Jake, give us your player to watch within this conference every Saturday.
Yeah, I'm going to go.
Please, not 4.
Yeah, well, no 1AB. None of that shit.
I'm going to go Pig
Who's in first?
Cage. The second string linebacker at UTSA. Yes, that is a real name, Pig Cage. He probably won't get
Name
in.
watch.
Definitely a name to watch for. No, all seriousness, I'm gonna go Byron Brown out of USF, quarterback. I think this guy, he could really give Hennigan a run for his money for first team all conference this year. I think he has the potential to be an absolute stud, especially with his receiver back in Atkins. So I'm high on this kid. I think he's due for a huge year, and who knows, maybe he's going to get a lot of money thrown at him going into 2025 from another school.
That's always a good one to follow, is where they could end up if they do have the year they're expected to. So that's a good point. JP, give us your player to watch in 2024.
Yeah, I'm going to go tight end here. I like talking the tight ends.
Oh,
funny,
Oscar.
All right, kid show.
This is a family show, George.
This is a family show.
Oscar Cardenas, he's a tight end at UTSA. This is a guy who has been a reliable piece for UTSA. I think he needs to take another step forward and be more than just a third down red zone option. If he can be a guy who's getting up in that 8 touchdown area, or he's getting around 400 or 500 yards receiving, it's going to help UTSA to, limitations unknown. So Oscar Cardenas, I think it'll be a great ad for UTSA if he can take a step forward.
All right, one from UTSA. Let's go down to Reese. Reese, take us through your player to watch.
Parks, I hope I don't take yours, but you mentioned it before. But I think Chandler Morris, the guy from going to North Texas, because people also forget this is the guy that started ahead of Max Duggan on that 22 season before that Cinderella year, but he's ended up unfortunately getting injured in that Colorado game, and I believe got injured last year against Iowa State. So that's a guy who Sonny Dykes, who was the coach of the year in 2022, like he had a lot of faith in that guy coming in as a freshman to be his starting quarterback. So just hasn't had the injury luck so far. He threw for over 1,500 yards last year, 12 touchdowns and 5 interceptions with a 65% completion rate. So it's a guy that I think people just forget about. But I think when you go down to maybe a smaller school, or he's maybe a little bit more appreciated, I think he's going to have a hell of a year down there for the Mean Green.
I love that because he can do it with his legs too. He gives you multifaceted looks, which is very important in this conference and very important in the Mean Green offense, both in the video game on the field. I'll tell you that right now. All right, my player to watch for 2024, it's a guy Jake talked about already, but give me Sean Atkins, dude. This guy put up a hell of a season last year, and if you look at the jump he made from 22 to 23, it's substantial. So he's really maintaining what he built within that offseason, and he's got a couple of opportunities to do it on the national stage. Like you said, they play in Tuscaloosa, then they host Miami. Those 2 games, he's going to have eyes on them, and I do think if he gets the quarterback play, which he should, he's going to perform and put up some more numbers this year. He had 92 receptions last year, 1,054 yards, 7 scores, and it's another guy that averaged over 11 yards per catch. So give me Sean Atkins as my player to watch in 2024. All right, that's our players. Let's go into the grand scheme of the entire conference. Let's talk conference championship game and winner. Let's lead this one off with Reese. Reese, give us your conference championship game and who you got winning the American Athletic in 24.
Well, with the champion, I went chalk. I think Memphis is too good of a team, but just to throw in a little bit of homerism for me, I was in San Antonio for a little bit, and I do think Jeff Traylor's still the hell of a coach. I think UTSA, you're replacing Frank Harris, who I said before, that guy finally got his doctorate and graduated from college, was there for 7 years. But he was a hell of a player. But again, Jeff Traylor, you also mentioned that who's the guy before they got from LSU, Denver Harris. So he's a guy, too, who can go out and recruit at a high level and make that program relevant. So I think he's a hell of a coach. I think they have the 4th best odds to win this conference. That's not too far off for this team. I think they can find a way to win. They get some bigger games at home, I believe, as well. So I don't think it'd be crazy for them to take a shot, but I just think Memphis is too good of a team this year, especially if there's going to have a 12-team playoff. They could be a team that could get a shot at the end.
I love that because I think we might have a unanimous pick here. Maybe, maybe not, but I'll give mine. I have Memphis over. Give me a little bit of my childhood, which I've already talked about. Give me Memphis over USF. I think USF has the pieces this year to sneak into that conference title game. I don't think they'll win it because, as I said before, I have Memphis in my 12-team college football playoff getting the G5 bid, but give me Memphis as my conference champion as well against USF. JP, what do you got?
Yeah, mine's different. We're not going to go chalk here.
Yeah.
I have Tulane and UTSA, and I have some reasoning here. I had to look up the conference title tiebreaker to get into the conference title game. Let me explain this to you here quick. It would go head to head. Problem is that Memphis does not play UTSA head to head. So you got to scratch that out. Whoever then is ranked in the latest college football playoff poll, and did not lose in the final season of the regular season. So it kind of gets touchy there, a little bit weird. Memphis probably more likely to be ranked in that. But if they lost last game of the year, the one conference game they'll lose to Tulane, my conference champion. So it has nothing to do with Memphis not being good enough. I think there's 3 teams here that have one loss within the conference. Just the way the schedule lays out, Memphis gets the short straw by not playing UTSA, who I think they could beat. But I do think the UTSA drop and the Tulane drop are a little less than what people think. I just think it sets up too perfect. So I have Tulane versus UTSA and Tulane winning this one.
I saw the reaction out of Jake. Jake, did he steal yours?
Steal my thunder. Yeah, that's exactly what I had.
You've never done that before.
I wanted to acknowledge too that we didn't really bring up those top 4 teams that we're talking about: USF, Tulane, UTSA, and Memphis. These are all teams that have one huge road game, and like, how can they get through, or how do they do in those road games? Memphis is Florida State, UTSA has Texas, South Florida has Alabama, and Tulane has Oklahoma. So we're going to find out pretty early maybe how these guys stack up against the rest of the big boys, if they're going to get that G5 bid. But for the same reasons, I have Tulane and UTSA, but a little bit also, I don't know if I trust Ryan Silverfield, the Memphis coach, to put up a good defense this year. With UTSA, I know I mentioned that an American team is either bad on one side of the ball and really good. UTSA is the most balanced, and I think Tulane is a 1B to being the most balanced team in this conference. I don't trust the defense on Memphis. And as much as I want to root for USF, I think that's my de facto team this year in this conference. I don't know if I trust them defensively yet either to win enough games to get in the conference title. So,
and whether or not Memphis is, as good as advertised and they're in that spot, like they have to play at South Florida. They have to play at UTSA. They then have to play at Tulane. Yep. You got to get out of the top 4 teams outside of yourself. You have to win all of those. Like, I think they got the toughest draw of the schedule, which is why I don't have them here. Just one loss keeps them out in this situation. Granted, if UTSA doesn't slip up anywhere else.
All right, that's it. That's conference title picks and predictions. Let's move on to our last point. A little bit of a new part to these previews. Hot takes, opinions, any other thing that's lingering out there before we wrap up the show. I believe, JP, you had one, so let's go to you.
I did. Yes. I think one of these teams clips a P4 team. There's so many opportunities, like just Tulane, like going off of the ones I think, that even have like shots. Memphis at Florida State, Rice at Houston, USF in Miami, Tulane, Kansas State, then Tulane gets at Oklahoma, UAB at Arkansas, UTSA at Texas. Now, the ones I have circled that are probably more likely to happen: Tulane, Kansas State. I think just the way that lays out playing at home. Rice at Houston. Houston's not a great team still. And I think Rice is going to be really chomping at the bit to get at them there. And Memphis at Florida State, just because of where it lays out in the schedule, right? Like, I think that'll be one Memphis has circled. Like, hey, you want the bid in the 12-team playoff? We have to go make a statement here. So that's my prediction for it. I think they get somebody, if not multiple of them.
I love that. Any other lingering thoughts out there, Jake, that bounce one off you? Reese, anything to close out the show before we wrap it up? Other than sneeze from Reese?
I was going to say, I don't.
I got a surprising team or a disappointing team?
Yeah, I have Rice as the surprise team.
God bless it, Jake. I don't even know why I asked you. I should have just said it out loud.
Army is the disappointing team. I just think just being. I had
South Florida. South Florida is your disappointing team.
Very well could be. I was gonna say, I don't think this is the best G5 conference in college football talent wise. Okay, maybe it's not that hot then. I suppose. I just think top to bottom, the Mountain West is better. I think when you get to boy, and I'm just looking at the magazine here. I'm thinking once you get to, God, you could even put Rice in there. Rice, Florida Atlantic, Navy, UAB, Tulsa, Charlotte, Temple. I don't think any of those teams could win 6 games in the Mountain West. I could probably throw even Army in there. And that's 70% of the conference. Once it gets past Memphis, UTSA, South Florida, and Tulane, I just don't think there's much there. I think East Carolina could be a surprise team defensively, but I don't think they're going to be very good compared to the rest of the country. Same for Rice. I think the Peters kid, that running back is going to be really good. Did I say that right? It's Peters.
We're talking about Rice.
Yeah, Rice.
Connors.
Connors, thank you. Connors Peters. Knew it was a last name with an S. First name with an S.
Hey, it was a last name and it had an S in it. Correct.
Yeah. But yeah, I think he had over 1,100 yards last year, total yards. So I think he's going to be. And we're not acknowledging the EJ Warner transfer enough. I don't think within conference. Yeah, he led the conference in passing yards. I know we touched on it, but led the conference in passing yards in returners this year. Yeah. And he's playing for a different
Temple
team.
Got to replace him.
Yeah.
I think if you go side by side with the Mountain West, Jake, I don't think you're far off. I would probably agree. I mean, you line up Ashton Jeanty as your number 1 running back in the conference versus Mekhi Hughes, give it to the Mountain West. Your number 1 listed wide receiver on here as a conference, at least what I'm looking at right now, is Atkins from USF. Put that against Ricky White. Yeah, give me the Mountain West all day on that. So I don't think we're far off, at least at those 2 positions of the top players.